Welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. Today's guest on Better Than I Found It is Grand Canyon University coach Mark Mueller. Mark, who is now in his 13th year at GCU and 12th as the head coach, has seen his teams really get better through the years. In fact, the last 2 years they've won the conference championship and been at the regional championship both years. We talk a lot about his philosophy in recruiting, his philosophy in coaching, how he got into coaching to begin with, and just all sorts of other good things. He's a great young coach. I think you'll enjoy this interview. All right, Better Than I Found It listeners, it's time to welcome my latest guest, Grand Canyon University coach Mark Mueller, to the podcast. Mark, great to have you on Better Than I Found It today.
Hey, Coach, thanks for having me on. This is truly an honor to be with you on this podcast.
Yeah, I've had I don't even know the number of coaches I've had on here now, but it's a lot. Been doing this for 4 years and a month, every Monday. And I can't get to all the coaches I want to get to. It just seems like there's so many that I want to learn from and different people. But you're certainly one that I've been thinking about in the last year or so because I've watched your program sort of on the rise. It's kind of it's pretty easy to see that you've had a team that at one point wasn't that competitive that has gotten that way. So that's why I really want you on here today to find out what you're doing that's interesting. But thank you for joining me for sure.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. This is awesome.
Absolutely. Well, summer's winding down. It's here in mid to late August, and that means classes are right around the corner. We start on August 26th here at Baylor. When do you guys get started?
We start Tuesday, September 3rd.
Oh, wait, you're basically a Labor Day start.
Yeah. We always start the Monday after Labor Day.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. That you've got an extra week to get ready for these kids coming back.
Yeah, 100%, and another week for it to cool down. So,
yeah. When does it start cooling down in Arizona? When does it start?
On a good month, in a good year, mid-September. Okay. But safely, end of September, basically when we start getting back from a couple of tournaments. By October 1st, it's really nice.
Yeah. I bet you have a month and a half there where it's just unbelievable, or 2 or 3 months anyway, huh?
Yeah. July and August are pretty hot. But we'll take the rest of the 10 months.
Yeah, I was getting ready to ask you about recruiting in Texas, and I basically spent most of the summer in Texas. My assistant coaches went elsewhere, but June was absolutely beautiful, the mildest June we've seen in years. And then first part of July but we have hit the dog days. I mean, it is hot because we actually have humidity when we get that temperature up around 105. You guys just don't have much humidity, but it's hot all the time. So anyway, I walked a lot of fairways this summer in Texas heat, and I just want to know how recruiting went for you. You don't need to give me any names or anything, but did you come up with some good players, you think?
Yeah, it was great. I mainly focused on the West Coast. Coach Shalom did an unbelievable job, as he has the last couple of years of really doing well in Europe. So he's been over there quite a bit. I've pretty much done everything in California and Arizona. And we feel really good about the kids that we've been able to target thus far.
That's great. Well, I mean, people always ask me all the time, Coach, how's recruiting going? And you have no idea. You truly don't have any idea until you get commitments or you think you have an idea, but you're really not sure. So I just always like to ask coaches how that's going. Did you happen to go to the U.S. Junior this year?
My assistant did.
Yeah.
I was someplace else at the time, but hers, per usual, was great. Unbelievable venue from what I understand. So a ton of tradition there at that golf course.
Oh, what a golf course! I had a player who actually had finished his freshman year at Baylor, Davis Ovard, who was still an 18-year-old. So he played, and he got to play with Tiger Woods' son. So he thought that was pretty special. So,
oh, that's pretty well. And I'm still getting used to the point of, having 18-year-olds play. It's been interesting the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if they allow 18-year-olds to play, you're still a junior golfer in their eyes. And Davis at first was kind of hesitant, but then he realized it's an age thing. It's not a grade thing. It doesn't matter what grade you're in. It's what age you are. And the age limit was 18. He had a great experience, made match play, and really enjoyed it. So
Yeah, no, I think it's great. You know, if they can play, you should play. You know,
mhm.
I wouldn't see why not. You know, you only get so many cracks at those, and making a USGA event, any USGA event, is obviously so special.
Absolutely. And he got the experience of a lifetime, honestly. He got to walk literally inside the ropes with Tiger Woods during the practice round. He literally talked with him all day long. It was a great experience. In fact, I had him on the podcast this couple weeks ago to talk about it. He was really
Wow,
thrilled. But
awesome.
I also like to figure out how these coaches that are successful in college golf, how they get their start. I mean, I know my story is very unusual. You know, I was a high school golf coach for 9 years and then went to work at Oklahoma State. I was an assistant coach in my mid 30s to early to mid 40s for 7 years as an assistant, not a very young assistant coach. But so my journey was a little bit different. So how was your playing career? I know where you played, but tell me a little bit about your playing career and then what sent you the direction toward coaching.
Yeah, so I have three brothers, two older, one younger. We grew up playing baseball, basketball, and golf. You know, that's just what we did. You know, my dad had us on the weekends. And we weren't at a golf course. We were at a baseball field. We were playing basketball. Um, and so that was kind of, as my dad always says, my mom, you know, needed those 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. My dad had us, and you know, those are some of the best days of my life, with me and my three brothers and my dad, playing golf, and growing all the way up playing it. Just having three brothers and my dad, you know, playing a fivesome every Saturday morning, was just an unbelievable, certainly things that, you know, I'll never ever forget. You know, getting to play with them, and be around your dad all weekend. And so, you know, we all played, all the way through high school, and played in college. Um, and I played at New Mexico State for 2 years, finished and played at Grand Canyon. Um, and, you know, early on, my dad was a basketball coach, in college, and that's what he wanted to do. And I think God led him in a different direction. And so I've always been around it. Um, and so I think that's kind of how it was, always kind of in the back of my brain. I think that, you know, hey, if there's ever a possibility, um, you know, when the person who you look up to, you know, my parents are my heroes, but, you know, my dad, you know, had always told me, goes, hey, I think if this opportunity, you know, ever finds itself, I think this is something you can excel in. You know, and when the person you look up to says that to you, you know, that really gives you a lot of confidence, to say, hey, you know, if this guy believes in me, and if this opportunity ever opens, um, you know, that really helped me. And putting that in the back of my brain. And then once the opportunity came, you know, I always remember that. And so that's kind of how, I got into coaching, and it's been an unbelievable ride for 13 years.
That's great. You've spent all 13 of those years at Grand Canyon, one as an assistant coach and 12 as the head coach. Talk about the pride. I've had several coaches on this podcast who are actually coaching at their alma mater. You know, one of them was my former assistant coach, Alan Bratton, who's at Oklahoma State now, and he's just absolutely thrilled that he gets to coach in Stillwater, where he went to college, where he played, and I think I want to hear your take on that. I mean, what kind of pride do you feel getting to do that?
Yeah, you know, to be honest with you, I wouldn't want to coach anywhere else. I absolutely love coaching at Grand Canyon. Um, it's it's seeing it from where we've been and to where we are now, um, has been unbelievable. You know, God has definitely put His hand on GCU, and so being just a little part of this, and being on the team of Grand Canyon University, and watching its upward trajectory as a whole, has been really really cool, and something that I'm definitely really thankful for.
Um, you know, I guess you get to speak to a recruit and like, this is what GCU did for me, and this is why I stayed, and this is why I don't want to go anywhere else. It's got to be pretty powerful be able to speak to a prospect like that.
Yeah, no doubt. Grand Canyon is definitely a part of my life, a big part of my life. It's a part of my family's life. This is kind of what we know now for the last 15, 16 years, and so and seeing its upward trajectory, it has been so cool, and it's definitely changed my life for the better.
Well, let's talk about that upward trajectory because when you first were coaching at GCU, you guys were Division II. And so you were the head coach as you transitioned in about a 4-year transition, I think, going from D2 to D1. Talk about that transition. I've had a few coaches on this podcast who have done it. That's got to be a little nerve-wracking, exciting. You got to be anxious. You got to be anticipating, a different world once you get on the other side. So talk about that.
Yeah, looking back at it, I really, really enjoyed those 4 years from the standpoint of things are just so much different now in college athletics. But B, those 4 years for me, looking back at it, they definitely had an old school kind of Sandlot feel, up to it in terms of the school. Our school was going from at that point, we had like 800 students. Now we have 20,000. So at that point, during that transition, we were going from 800 to 1,000 to 4,000. And I'd get on the phone with guys and say, hey, we're going from Division II to Division I. We cannot play in postseason for 4 years, but this is going to be an opportunity for you. If you want to come and play in warm weather, we're going to play in 10 Division I golf tournaments plus conference. And basically the goal is let's just see how good we can get and see how good you can get, and one thing that I'm most proud of as a coach is those 4 years. Every year we got to the conference tournament and we couldn't win, but every single year those 5 guys they said, hey, we want to win this, unofficially, and we're going to give it our best. And that takes a lot of pride, because when you can't win it, it's easy to say, hey, what are we here for? But those guys took a tremendous amount of pride of being the first ones to go into Division I. And, I still talk to a bunch of those guys today and they say, hey, coach, we started it off. And so that is something I'm really thankful for those guys, to say, hey, we started this thing off, and they look back at it and they love their time.
Well, I look at that and I say that has to be the ultimate in gratitude, but also the ultimate in trust and belief that you were going to give them a great experience, even though they couldn't compete in postseason, or couldn't, actually go to the national championship, even go to a regional. I mean, they had to really, you must have told them this is going to be a great experience, and then you delivered as well.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. And looking back at it, I kind of laugh from the standpoint of, I remember trying to make a schedule, and I was like, holy cow, this is tough. But I found 10 Division I tournaments, and I mean, I think we played 2 years where we had 4 in back to back to back. Had 2 in a row this tough back to back, but 4. But I told the guys, hey, this is just the situation we're in. We can make the best of it, or we can kind of lay down. And they say, hey, coach, we want to play. And so they had an anytime, anywhere mentality, and it's something that I'm really, really appreciative, and I will not forget the effort those guys put into doing that.
Yeah, because I mean, they're playing at a university where they don't have a chance to be an All-American or be in the postseason. It's the transition piece. And a lot of schools that have to go through that, the kids don't have that much energy. It's like, but these kids obviously did. So kudos to you on recruiting the right kids and then shepherding them through that process. You also have a very unique situation. You mentioned that it's been a family thing for a while, but another family member that's involved is your dad. Your dad is the president of the university. So I have to assume there's some huge advantages there, but I bet there's also some disadvantages to having your dad be the president. Can you talk on either one of those?
Yeah, I mean, the disadvantages, I don't really see any. My dad is very transparent. I mean, and always been very transparent of what the expectations are. Um, and he was a former coach as well. So he's always told me, hey, when you need me, I'm here, but I'm going to let you do your thing, and so I've been unbelievably thankful for that, and I use him quite a bit. Not only from a coaching standpoint, but just advice, especially now from with how college athletics is changing. He's definitely a sounding board for me and a great resource.
Yeah, I bet he is. Our president here at Baylor is Linda Livingstone, and Linda was a 4-year starter on the Oklahoma State women's basketball team. She played on the basketball team at Oklahoma State when my twin sister was playing golf. But I think it's incredible to have a president who understands athletics, who understands what we're doing and what we're trying to teach these young men and women. So I think it's a great advantage from that standpoint.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a soccer game, basketball game, baseball, whatever. My dad's going to be there, and he fully supports athletics, and not only fully supports it, but just giving us the resources, to be very successful at a high level.
That's incredible. Um, you mentioned three brothers. All of them played golf, I assume, plus all the other sports. But one of your brothers is really an accomplished golfer. That's Jesse. And I know he's helped your golf team. I know he's helped your players. I know he's helped you. Tell me about that relationship and just how much good professional golf he's played.
Yeah, Jesse is what he's doing is really phenomenal. Being 40 years old now, he works 40, 50 hours at our golf course. He's got two young kids, and arguably he's playing the best golf of his life right now. Making the cut in the Waste Management Open in February, hitting it to a foot on 16 on Saturday, was probably might be the greatest golf moment, and we've had a lot of them, thankfully, but that was unbelievable.
Were you there in the stands?
I couldn't. It's so tough to get in there,
Yep.
but I was on the outside, and I just was standing next to my nephew and my mom and dad, and we just heard this incredible roar. And I just looked up and said, "God, I hope that's Jesse." And then I looked at my phone. I had about 100 text messages about 5 minutes later, and I said, "Dad, that was him."
That was
Um,
him.
and so unbelievable moment for us. And then, got to watch him play in the PGA Championship at Valhalla. Played really well, missed the cut by one. And so it's incredible to see him compete at such a high level. He's been such a help to our golf team from the standpoint of, number one, anything kind of swing related, I push to him. I try to separate those two personally. Um, and so he's taken lessons from some of the top instructors in the world. His golf knowledge is really high. So he's been able to help there. Number two, he's unbelievable in terms of course management. It's interesting. I'd love your take on this. I think sometimes it's almost backwards. College kids sometimes play a little too aggressive, and professionals sometimes are playing, they're playing more conservative, especially in the par fives. If their second shots are out of the rough, they're putting it into a wedge in their hand. And then thirdly, just perspective. When he was playing as professional, he played professionally for a long time, but I think that he would tell you that, when your life changes and now when it's not the most important thing, sometimes it frees you up to play better golf.
It really does. I I talk to players all the time that struggled in college playing for me, and I always take some responsibility there. It's got to be some of what I did that didn't allow him. I know it's his responsibility to play well, but when they free up and they're no longer playing for a check or whatever, it's like their game is so much better, and they're going, what? Why didn't I have this? And most of the time, it's because you're putting so much pressure on yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting. As guys, graduate and they'll call me and we'll talk. I was I met a guy, a former player of mine last week for dinner, and he's now 30 years old, doing really well in the financial world. And he was like, Coach, I'm playing as an amateur. This is the best golf I've ever played. And I thought, I started laughing. And he goes, "What?" I said, "I hear that from just about from a lot of guys, and it's just because it's interesting. You want your players to make it a big deal, but it doesn't need to be too big of a deal. I really feel that there's a line there, and that's hard to balance.
A lot of kids and a lot of coaches tell me they also that it's balancing the pressure of school, making grades, career. What am I going to do with my life? That type of thing. So there's a lot of unknowns there that maybe they struggle with. But I know this: if I can ever crack the code on why they play better when they quit really and truly competing, if I could figure out how to get that mindset when they're playing for Baylor, I think we'd have a kid that's in a lot better place because and I realize playing when you're playing for every alum, for every donor, for every current team member, for every coach, anybody who's ever loved your program, when you shoot that 78 that or the 68, it was there for both. So I don't know. Do you have the answer?
One thing that I've learned is, or noticed is that when the professional golf thing, it's always there for them. You know what I mean? It's as a freshman professional, and once they kind of, if those who start working right away and that mindset is not there, it definitely frees them up, in my opinion. One thing I am definitely going to try to do a better job of in the coming years is, guys, do the best you can today. And wherever God puts you when you're done here, that's where you're going to end up. But your responsibility and my responsibility together is, hey, on the first day of practice, August 29th for us, let's do the very best we can. And then let's move on to the next day. And, let's not make it more than it needs to be.
I love that. But maybe I'll try that this year. Who knows? As head coaches, we're often very reliant on our assistant coaches. I mean, we put a lot on them in a lot of ways, but a ton of different things we ask them to do. You have a very good young assistant coach. A couple of months ago, he was on my podcast. That's Mikkel Shalom. And I watched him from afar. I haven't spent a lot of time with him, but I've watched him, and he seems like a good one. What are his great qualities, and what are the qualities that you think he possesses that make him a great assistant coach?
Yeah, I think there's two. The first thing is he has a unbelievably high motor. That is whether it's in my opinion, a coach or a player, that might be the hardest thing to teach or to get out of somebody, in my opinion. His motor is, I'll put it up against anybody's. He has a relentless attack every single day. And then number two, he just truly loves making players better. No matter how it is or what it looks like. And so when you put those two things together, you have a really high motor and an appetite for making a player better. In my opinion, that goes a long way as a coach.
So I had both of those when I was a young coach. I still have a high motor for a guy that's 100, but but I think when you lose the enthusiasm, which if you're saying high motor and kind of relating it as in enthusiasm, my only bad times in coaching have been when that motor was low or the enthusiasm was low. So I always encourage people keep it up there. I do see that from him, and I know he loves helping people. So if he can stay there, he's probably going to be a great head coach one day.
Yeah, 100%. I could not agree more.
You, Mark, are in your 13th year overall at GCU, 12th as a head coach. Let's go over a few stats here. Your teams have won 15 team titles, if your website is correct. Individually, you've had 16 guys win a championship of some sort. You've had 22 guys get all conference. You've won the last two WAC championships, and your team has been to the regional tournament for the first time ever in program history each of the last 2 years. So that's a pretty good little group of statistics that you've got going on right there. And I know there's some reasons that you probably think that are important that have led to that success, but And I also know you guys have a pretty good team coming back this year. So why the uptick? Why have you gotten so much better in the last 5 years?
Well, it's definitely 100%, a we thing. You know, from the coaching staff to the players to just everybody at GCU, from strength and conditioning to nutrition to academics, everybody's definitely pulling in the in the same direction, and the standards have just get a little higher each year. But from the last couple of years, the two things that I'm just unbelievably impressed with these guys is number one, great character people, very high character, do the right things on and off the course. And then number two, there's times when I have to tell guys, hey, let's go. You got to get to school. You need to take a break. Take a day off. That's rare. So when you combine character with extreme work ethic, I think that's the biggest two reasons for the uptick with in the last couple of years.
I would say a lot of people overlook and underestimate the importance of finding those kids in recruiting, finding kids you think are going to be that. Because, when you inherit a program, you're kind of inheriting the people that the coach before you got. But when you start getting your own guys in there and you're recruiting to a certain type of player, it might not look the same on every kid, but he's got it when he's got that love for the game, that work ethic, and all of that. So you guys got to the regional for the first time in spring of 23, and you played a very interesting golf course for your first regional ever, the Institute. What a challenge that place was. I mean, par was good on any hole when we were out there.
I mean, 100%. After we got done, I just looked at my team and they were gassed. But man, what an unbelievable golf course. That's got to be in my top five of the nicest places I've ever stepped foot on. I'd be hard pressed to find four more, better. But boy, was that a challenge. I mean, fast greens, long, thick, rough. I think it was either 8 or 17. It was about 250, 260. But what a fun experience, though.
Well, if you think about your first regional, so these first time you've been to a regional, first time your team has been to a regional, and the players are experiencing it. And in Las Vegas, they had a regional where I think 47 under par got a playoff for the fifth spot. I mean, this was not one of those golf courses. This was a golf course. If you shot even par on 9 holes, you did your job. You absolutely did your job, and you helped your team. We had a kid shoot 69, one in the first round, one in the second round, and one in the third round. And if you remember, those greens were getting so firm and fast. I don't know. I think it was just an incredibly unusual experience. I love the place. I think they could host a national championship there one day.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not like these guys are hitting wedge 9, 8 irons into those greens either. I love it from the standpoint of, it really makes kids think from the standpoint of when you got a 7 iron, 6 iron, 5 iron in your hand, it's hard to play to the middle of the green, and if you were attacking pins there, good luck. You were going to be chipping for some really tough spots.
Yes, you were. Well, I used a term a couple of weeks ago with a coach. We were talking about mid-majors, and I know where the term came from. I believe the term came from football and basketball. So you had the Power Five conferences relative to football and basketball, and then you had all the mid-majors. So I asked him if that term bothered him. He kind of did. It was J.D. Fletcher at Miami of Ohio. And I just want to know, does it bother you? Or if it doesn't, how have you handled the term mid-major? Because I hear it all the time.
To me, it doesn't bother me from the standpoint, especially now with the last year and a half, 2 years, with just how much it's all changed. It's a completely different deal now. And so I think it's an outdated word, to be honest with you. From the standpoint now, it's about resources. And you'll speak of just about GCU, our budget, our facilities, our campus, none of those would tell you mid-major. And I think it's more about that resources, facilities, and budget as opposed to the term mid-major.
Okay. I hadn't thought about it like that. I mean, and honestly, you know, some Power Five conference teams don't actually have a ton of resources for their golf program, because everything's been put to football or whatever. So I guess it's just matters where you are, what the school is putting into it. I just want to know if the term bothered you. I still use the term, and I feel like, should I do that even? I don't know.
Yeah, no, to me it doesn't because there's a lot of every single year there's 4 or 5 teams that make it. There's quote unquote mid majors that have won national championships. And so I don't think that they would probably consider themselves mid majors. Just from the standpoint of what they have. Uh, and so, but it is an interesting term, but it doesn't bother me.
Good for you. You've alluded to this about how the collegiate model is changing, the landscape of collegiate athletics, NIL, transfer portal, paying for grades, roster limits is on the horizon. We know something's going to happen there. Is there anything you've done to adjust to all of this, or are you just? And I know everybody's situation is different, so it might affect Alabama differently than Baylor than Grand Canyon, but it is changing. There's a lot of differences in our sports.
Yeah, no doubt, and I think it's all about how you choose to look at it. You can choose to look at it as it is what it is, or from my standpoint, my role as a college golf coach has changed a little bit. For the standpoint of we're in Phoenix, and there's definitely NIL opportunities out there. It's a huge golf mecca. And so from that standpoint, it can be used as, an advantage. And so, but it's, 4 or 5 years ago, was that on my mind? Absolutely not. In terms of building those relationships and doing that stuff. But now, it's definitely there, and the way I look at it is it's not going back now.
Genie's out of the bottle. We're headed
Yeah,
down the
yeah,
highway for sure.
yeah.
Um, Best piece of advice you've ever received from another coach? Because you've been doing this 13 years. Like, what coach gave you the best piece of advice you use every day?
Yeah, I would say 3 things. Number one, my dad, he was a former coach. He always told me it's we. It's never me. Include everybody, and put your players first. He goes every single day. Put your players first, and that's always really stuck with me. Number two, my third or probably second or third year coaching. I'm still trying to get above water at this point. You know what I mean? It's every day you're waking up and you're doing the best you can. And my family's always had a relationship with Coach Roy, who represents Phil Mickelson, and the guy was an unbelievable golf coach. And so just out of the blue, I emailed him and I said, hey, Coach, would you have some time to maybe sit down, eat breakfast, get lunch, just so I can pick your brain on some stuff. And he got back to me. He goes, yeah, I think I emailed him like a Tuesday. We met on Thursday, and I thought it'd be 30, 40 minutes, an hour. And he goes, show up at 7 a.m. Well, he spent 5 hours with me.
Mm, mm.
And I must have taken 10, 15 pages worth of notes. And he told me all about his coaching career, starting at Scottsdale Community College, going to Arkansas, to ASU, to where he is now. And one of the things that he told me, he kept telling me, is he goes, you need to be a golf coach, not a golf teacher. And he goes, you need to lead your program, make that the most important thing of being the leader of the program, and let the teaching stuff, take care of itself. And so I that's always left an impression on me from the standpoint of, every day as a head coach, you got to lead and do the best you can and put these guys in the best possible positions to be successful. He goes, he told me that's more important than sometimes working with a golf swing. Now
Mm-hmm.
there is a time and a place, obviously, but he always kept, throughout that 5 hours, he kept mentioning that to me, and I've always tried to stick with that. And then The last one is I don't you probably I'm not sure if you remember this, but I remember emailing you probably 8, 9, 10 years ago. And I asked you, I said, Coach, what I was looking for an assistant coach at the time. I said, what are you looking for? And I'll never forget this. And one of the things you said was like, I want a guy who will walk over hot coals to get to practice.
Mm.
And when I think about that, I think about Coach Shalhoub. And he'll walk over hot coals to get to practice. And if it wasn't for that piece of advice, who knows if I hire him or not.
I appreciate you saying that. I tell that. I still talk about that all the time. It's because that's who I was when I was a young coach. I was a high school golf coach. Mike Holder hired me, and he said, don't get any designs that you're going to be the head coach. You're going to be my assistant for a couple of years. I'm going to get you a head coaching job. And I had no designs on being the head coach at Oklahoma State, but I absolutely captivated him with, I would crawl across 5 miles of burning hot coals just to get to Karsten Creek. That's how badly I wanted that job. And he knew it, but I didn't even say it that way. Just that's the way it came across. So I tell the guys that all the time. I'm glad you listened to that.
No, I still have that email.
That's great. All right. Well, speaking of great coaches, we've been talking about best piece of coaching advices you've had and becoming a coach and all of that. And by the way, Steve Loy was a great coach. He was a competitive son of a gun. But
yeah.
We both share a Drew, last name Drew, at our universities. Mine is Scott Drew. He's our men's basketball coach, one of the great coaches I've ever been around. That enthusiasm you see and that attitude and that smile and all that is very genuine. That's just who he is. Doesn't matter. And he's an absolutely terrific coach. So upbeat, so positive. But I know you have his brother, Bryce. Tell me about Bryce Drew.
Yeah, Coach Drew, it's been awesome. Been in the tournament the last 3 out of 4 years. This last year, won the first game in the tournament, beat St. Mary's. What an unbelievable moment for our school that was. And then for 37 minutes with toe-to-toe with Alabama, they pulled away at the end. But unbelievable game. I have the utmost respect for Coach Drew from the standpoint of how he leads in such a godly fashion. And he is a really demanding coach, but he does it in a way of teaching and talking. And I have the utmost respect for that. He walks it, walks out his faith in a way that I have. It's rare to see.
Their dad, he was a great coach himself, and he raised some great boys that are doing a lot, changing a lot of lives, really doing great. And I think they're two of the best coaches around. So that's great to hear. If you had to pick a coach outside the sport in the last 15 years that you've been kind of observing, watching, reading about, videos, whatever, who would be one of your favorite all-time coaches and why?
I would say two. First one would be Brad Stevens, basketball coach at Butler, who's now the GM for the Celtics. Just after reading his book, what an eye-opening experience that was from the standpoint of, obviously in Indiana, there's Purdue, there's Indiana, there's Notre Dame, and then obviously here comes Butler making back-to-back national championships with also having a couple, I think 2 NBA guys. That's really an impressive feat, and seeing them bring in freshmen, stay there. And the second one is Coach Few at Gonzaga. Just seeing what he's done the last 10 years. I'm not sure if there's a better, a more successful run, in terms of you're at this level and then they just keep raising the bar, and they've been so good for so long, and doing it with guys that they're recruiting and bringing them in.
That's really good. Those are two great coaches right there. I'm a little older than you are, so I've got some older examples, and there's a lot of great young examples, but mine was John Wooden. I've read everything he wrote or anything written about him, and Tom Landry. I was a big Dallas Cowboys fan when I was a boy, and I just always appreciated the way both of those men led. And I don't know. I just think every coach has to have some coach that's not part of their He's not, you hadn't even had a personal relationship with him, but that changes their kind of view of how you would coach. And I agree with the two you've got right there. Are fantastic coaches. They've done a great job. Speaking of coaches doing a great job, most of the time it starts with our recruiting. There's got to be an importance in the recruiting process, how important it is to get the right kids. I look in college golf, I'm thinking of two great examples of guys that find the player who will respond to their type of coaching. And that's Mike Small at Illinois and Ryan Hybl at University of Oklahoma. They both have their own personalities. It's their own type of program, but they find the right guys. So they're obviously knowing what they're looking for. What do you look for in a recruit? And I know it won't be necessarily the same guy that Ryan Hybl is looking for, but what do you look for?
Yeah, number one, I say, as you know, everybody on your coaching staff needs to be on the same page. When it comes to this, the first thing is character. Are they doing the right things both on and off the golf course? High character kids, whether you're playing good golf or bad golf, they make it easier. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Number two, guys who really see the value of getting an education, but not only getting an education, but doing well in the classroom. If your best is a 3.5 GPA, that's what we're wanting. That's what we're wanting from you. If your best is a 4.0, we want you striving to get a 4.0. Then lastly is guys who say, hey, when they get the phone call from GCU, say, you know what, that is a place where I can get really good at. That's a place where I can be in an environment where I can become the best player I can become there. And so those are the three things, character, the grades part, and then, the lastly is, hey, when we talk GCU, listen, you know what, I can get good there, and I'm cool with that.
That's good. Everybody's formula is a little bit different. Every time I talk to a coach, anytime I ask them that question, there's always a little bit different things. But one thing that's pretty much the same is we're all looking for kids with character if we could find them. We might look at it a little differently, and maybe it's not as high on some people's lists. But I mean, if you are recruiting and willingly knowing you're recruiting a kid of low character, you have absolutely brought some problems onto your team. And honestly, that's just going to give you headaches and heartaches, but you're not even thinking about what it's going to do to those kids you've already got on the team that didn't ask for you to bring that kid in, right?
Yeah, no doubt. As you know, coach, like, it's when you're winning and guys are playing well and shooting scores with sixes in front of them, it's easy. It's fun. It's everybody's having a good time. It's when things go the other way, which, it happens during the season, that's when I feel like the character part matters the most. If you have a team of guys that's not pointing fingers, that's not blaming anybody, then, you're going to get through it on the other side. But, if it goes the other way and you have some finger pointing going on, that's when it's tough to get out.
Yeah, I think characters, I always tell the kids and a parent when they're in my office, it's really a deal breaker. If I find out that he's got issues with character, he's really struggling with it, it's probably not going to happen. And it doesn't mean that someone won't slip through the cracks. And you just, as a coach, you have to deal with it once he gets there, but you'd like to not recruit it if you keep from it.
100%.
Yeah, for sure. So along those lines, sometimes in the heat of battle, we get the expectations of results. We lose sight of why we do this. But, if we have examples of really inspirational stories of kids that we can go back and talk about and point to, that's the reason I coach. That's why I do it, because of this kid. Do you have a story like that? I've had several, but do you have one for me today?
Yeah. So I had a kid, this is probably my fourth or fifth year in coaching. He sends me an email. He goes, hey, coach, my name is Matt McClung. I'm currently at a Division III school. I'm transferring to GCU. I'm driving down there. I'd love to talk to you about getting a spot on your team. He goes, I don't need any scholarship. He goes, I just want to prove to you I can play at this level. So I said, hey, if you're coming to GCU, let's talk when you get down here. So he gets down here about a week or two later when school starts, and we're talking. I said, hey, Matt, this year we had 11 or 12 guys. I said, I just don't know if adding another one right now is the best thing to do for the team. So he kind of licks his lips, nods his head, and as he's leaving, he didn't slam the door, but he goes, Coach, you're going to remember this conversation. He goes, I will be here next year, and I will be on this golf team. And he shut the door pretty aggressively. And I just said, okay, I guess, we'll see. And so fast forward about a year later, where it's about the second week of August, school starting about 2 weeks. I'm out recruiting at the Arizona Open. Got some players playing. My oldest brother Jesse's playing, and I'm out there the second day, and I'm looking at the leaderboard, and I see this kid, Matt McCraw, about 8th, 9th place, playing in a tough place at Trim Country Club. So I said, wow. So after day 2, I see the dude's in 3rd place.
Mm-hmm.
I think, okay, oh boy, So I go out there the 3rd day, it's 117 degrees, Trim Country Club, and I stood right behind him on just about every shot. I was like, I'm going to put pressure on this kid, and I'm going to see. And he went toe-to-toe with some really, really good players, did not back down, gets 3rd place. So I was like, all right, this kid's just earned a spot on the team. So I call him about 45 minutes later. I said, hey, Matt, you're on the team. I mean, just was so fired up, was like, Coach, thank you. He goes, I cannot wait for this. So the kid had never won a golf tournament in his life. Fast forward to about a month and a half later, we're at New Mexico State's event. I walked all 54 holes with him. We won as a team, and he won the individual.
Oh, wow.
And and I just never will forget that from the standpoint of, that conversation. Here was a kid, he could have easily said, all right, I'm done. I'm just not, he didn't give me a shot. But he goes, Coach, that conversation, fired me up. He goes, I had a year to get ready, and I played a bunch of stuff by myself. And I was just, every single day I thought about getting on that golf team. And sure enough, he gets his opportunity. Not only that, a month and a half later, he wins a Division I golf tournament. I still tell people that story today, and some people don't believe me. And we just talked the other day, Matt and I did, and just what a cool story though, from a guy who transferred from a D3 school, just got down here. He had a girlfriend coming down to GCU, packed up his truck, drove down here, no guaranteed spot, didn't get it first try, second try, gets on, wins a tournament, and had a great 2-year career.
Yeah, I love stories like that. It shows you the power of the human spirit, honestly. I mean, he could have been dejected that day and said, well, heck with that coach. He didn't believe in me or whatever. What he said was, I'm going to show him. And he did. And a year later, he wins a Division I golf tournament. That's unthinkable. He went from D3 to D1 and he won.
Yeah, 100%. And he never won a golf tournament in his life, and I walked all 54 holes with him. And I'm just sitting, the last day, the first hole, he just busts a drive right down the middle. It's a iron to about 30 feet, and he looks at me and goes, Coach, I'm gonna make this thing. And sure enough, poured it right in the back of the hole, and I said, well, off we go. Ended up winning by a couple shots, and we still talk about it to this day.
That's great. Well, coaches need stories like that. We need experiences like that. It doesn't mean that every kid that walks in your office is going to get that opportunity, but you gave him a chance, and he went out and did something with it by showing you he could play, and then he was on the team. That's wonderful.
Yeah, no doubt. I think just as you alluded to, the human spirit and mind, can do powerful things. When there's a whole bunch of determination and courage behind it. And it's really, as a coach, unbelievable to see when kids exceed their expectations. I think that is the greatest thing about coaching is when you see a team or a group of kids exceed their expectations and do something people thought maybe they couldn't have done.
Isn't that the essence of coaching, is getting kids to believe more than they ever thought they could do? I mean, believe it and do it. That's just when you do that, you're a game changer if as a coach, when you can get somebody to do that. So congratulations on that story. I love it. Tell me about your current team. I know you all have quite a few kids returning. So just tell me who's going to be on the team this fall, and then we'll get to your fall schedule.
Yeah, we had two seniors graduate, but everybody else is coming back. We're really excited about the guys coming back, and then we're really excited about the guys that we have coming in. I think it's going to be a very competitive team, both internally in terms of qualifying, which is what every coach wants. Guys pushing each other, but also I think it's a team that it's well formed from the standpoint of there are some older guys that are going to be leading the team with some younger guys coming in, which is, I think, what you want from the standpoint of when you have had a couple of guys be there 4 or 5 years, and especially these guys being on the uptick of saying, hey, now we're creating something where it's, hey, guys, this is how we do things here, and this is the expectation here. And so I'm really looking forward to coaching with Coach Mike and my brother and our team this year. There's a lot of anticipation to get the year started.
Well, it should be. You've on a really great 2-year run, and this year you've been knocking on the door. Now you want to kick it through and get to that national championship. You want to talk about a hard golf course, La Costa? Oh my gosh, that place was brutal last year, or this just 2 months ago. Anything creative or new you're going to try this year that you'd want to share? Just anything unusual, different in qualifying or anything?
I'm going to try to make it, as competitive as possible. I think every coach is trying to do that, but also I really want to try to put an emphasis this year in terms of the team being player led. I think when you have two good captains at the top or a captain, and they can drive the boat, that's a big deal. When you got guys kind of policing themselves and challenging themselves. But I also think it takes a certain, as a coach, you got to trust them, and trust that they're doing the right things. And so, but when it happens, I think that's how you get the best outcomes. When guys are leading themselves.
My best teams I've ever coached, the players were doing most of the coaching. I mean, I was literally not on cruise control, but I wasn't stressed late in the season because those guys had led the train. I'm hoping I've got some guys that'll do that this year.
Yeah, it's awesome.
For sure. So tell me about your schedule. Where do you start? What have you got this fall?
So we start at Southern Dunes, hosted by USC. The first tournament started this year. There's a regional championship hosted there in 26. Really great golf course. Then we're going to the Tucker at UNM. Really good college event. A lot of history there. Then we're going to University of Pacific, and then we end at Cal Poly at the Preserve. It's supposed to be a great golf course. We're really looking forward to that. And anytime you can play in Monterey, I love playing in Monterey.
Yeah, that's actually quite a schedule right there. I mean, there's nothing to be. I mean, you better play well. How about that?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. And I know the guys are too. It's fun when there's a lot of anticipation going into it and a lot of excitement around it. And the guys, want to keep this thing going and moving in the right direction. So we're really looking forward to the year.
Well, so tell me, how much time are you going to have between the first day of classes and when you leave for the first event?
We start September 3rd. The first tournament's in Arizona, so we have like 7-8 days.
But you will have already started qualifying, right?
Yeah. We start I think August 28th, and so we're gonna play 7 rounds before we get going in Southern Dunes. So really looking forward to it.
Well, Mark, I wish you the best of luck this year. I know you've got a great team. I don't know when we'll see you, but my hope is it's at a regional or at La Costa in May. I would love to see you at either place.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. As you know, you've been to both regionals and nationals multiple times, and won a couple. There's just no experience like it. Regionals the last 2 years has been awesome. It's basically almost a PGA Tour event. It's the way it feels, and so hoping to keep that going because it's such a unique deal.
Yeah, I think you guys are ready for it, but I certainly appreciate you spending an hour with me here on Better Than I Found It, and I hope we get to keep on doing these things. I know the landscape of college golf is changing, but I really feel like we've got more good people in coaching than we've ever had in college coaching. So I'm really thrilled about that, and you're one of them. So thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Coach, and again, thanks so much for that. I barely known you, but thanks so much for that email.
Absolutely.
10 years ago.
My pleasure.
That was really cool.
My pleasure. Well, best of luck, and we'll talk to you again soon.